West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
This month, we have been featuring the Atlantic magazine's special issue that looks into the current threats to U.S. democracy. The lead piece is ominously titled, January 6th Was Practice. Joining us now, senior editor of The Atlantic and the host of the podcast Floodlines, Van Newkirk. His piece for the special issue is entitled The Small Lie, to support the Republican myth that our elections are rife with fraud and someone needs to take the fall. And Van, in the piece, you tell the story of Crystal Mason, a resident of Texas, who was arrested for alleged illegal voting. You write in part, quote, the story of Mason, a black woman, illuminates the extraordinary efforts the Republican Party has made to demonstrate that fraud is being committed by minority voters on a massive scale. That false notion is now an article of faith among tens of millions of Americans. It has become an excuse to enact laws that make voting harder for everyone, but especially for voters of color, voters who are poor, voters who are old, and voters who were not born in the United States. It is a vicious cycle, which is exactly the point. First, gin up fear about fraud. Then use that fear to aggressively prosecute voting infractions. Then use those prosecutions to create stricter laws. Then use the stricter laws to induce more examples of fraud. Then use the examples to gin up even more fear. It must be underscored. There is no evidence that illegal voting of any kind occurs at a level capable of influencing elections. Van, explain what Crystal Mason was accused of.
So Crystal Mason was accused of, well, she was actually convicted of illegal voting in the 2016 election. She was on a federal supervised release program from prison sentence and did not know that she had to complete that supervised release in order to be eligible to vote. So she filed a provisional ballot. It was rejected because of her status, because she wasn't done. And despite the fact that that ballot was rejected, she actually still ended up being prosecuted for illegal voting. Ended up getting 5 years in prison for it.
I think Van Eddie really laid out this entire, why we stand as much our democracy in a threatened position as it was on January 6th. Things haven't changed. In fact, things are the same, if not worse, because I don't think people understand the danger that we still face right now as a country.
Oh, absolutely. American democracy is in peril. Van, I really enjoyed reading your piece, and of course, there are historical parallels, but I want to ask you this question. Is there a way to think about this lie about voter fraud as part of, a continuous part of the insurrection on January 6th? That what we're experiencing with these claims around voter fraud is the ongoing insurrection. That January 6th wasn't this bounded event, that it is actually continuing forward with these sorts of efforts across states in the country.
Well, that's exactly how I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking of the insurrection as an outgrowth of this existing anti-democratic message and spirit that's been in America for, forever, but has been really virulent over the last couple of years. So we're talking about, understandably, trying to avert the next possible insurrection or coup in 2024, 2025. I think what we need to really be focusing on, what should sober us all, is the real possibility that it might not even be necessary. We could have already undermined and gotten rid of, in lots of places, the democratic spirit before then, in the election. So I think what we have to realize is that this narrative of mass voter fraud, especially in black and brown communities, has been the underpinning of the entire reason why people were out there in the Capitol on January 6th in the first place.
Right, and we have historical parallels, Van, with regards to the collapse of Reconstruction and the fact that black men had the vote and the assault on black men. But what's your take on the Democratic Party's response? I know we have Congressman Swalwell here, but what do you make of the Democrats' response to this assault on voting rights that we see across the country?
Well, I think we've had a lot of focus, understandably again, on the actual events that happened on January 6th. And on a real effort to try and stop them from happening again. I don't think we've seen the same type of effort or same type of get it done at all cost spirit in regards to voting rights, in regards to restoring the Voting Rights Act, in regards to getting something done that's actually going to safeguard these people in these communities who need that type of safeguard in order to be able to vote in 2024. And there are big packages, big provisions on the table, but it remains to be seen if they're going to pass in the Senate.
Well, that's the question, Congressman. Let's talk about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Where is that right now? Where does it stand?
Nothing could be more urgent than passing that, right? I mean, if 20 years from now we've lost our democracy, we look more like, Hungary, Turkey, Russia, I don't think anyone's going to, see it as comfort that at least we preserve the filibuster in the Senate.
So what do you think? Is there movement there? What's going to happen?
I think the pressure, frankly, has to come from the president. It really has to come from him. He has made it a priority, but the downward pressure has to come to the senators that are holding up from the president.
There are so many different threats to our democracy right now that are happening at the same time. That's the other thing. It's the fire hose of information that, if you stop to think about it, it's almost hard to comprehend. But if you start at Facebook, not solved. Not solved. Misinformation, disinformation flies around on Facebook and other platforms about the pandemic, about our democracy, every single day, every second. And then you have the insurrection that we're trying to come to terms with. We're trying to show the truth about what happened. You have networks, even news networks, even whitewashing it or changing or creating disinformation. You have what we just discussed here. You look at this issue of The Atlantic, you read every article, it still doesn't cover everything that's happening. And I worry at this point. I don't know if you all remember Elijah Cummings when he said, when you're dancing with the angels, the question must be asked, what did you do when our democracy was in peril? It was something. I mean, are we going down a road where perhaps we will not be able to turn back if we don't take all of these issues seriously at the same time?
Like Eddie said, I see democracy as being on life support right now. And I put people in two camps, not Republicans or Democrats, but you're either trying to resurrect it and redeem it, or you're trying to pull the plug. So put Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger on our team. I'll put aside the issues that we have with them on other, policy debates, because right now, give me the problem that 5 years from now we can debate, abortion or the size of government or education. So we should be a big tent party that embraces them. And there's no single, way to solve the voting rights abuses, but the most effective one would be to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, because that could at least put the Department of Justice into play to review every single voting rights change in these states.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of December of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Oh, it's just a velvety hollandaise sauce over a lovely egg dish. Please, please don't think untoward thoughts. Oh no, we don't want to get rid of all the meddlesome breeze. Well, just the meddlesome ones. All right? Because the meddlesome make us miserable. And I'm looking at you guys there on SCOTUS, and you know who I'm talking about. Okay, well, so much for the 100 Years' War. Yeah, we got that coming up. And that's a long time. You know, people forget how long 100 Years' War was back in the day. Yeah, none of this, like, lightning fast wars that go on for about 4 years, well, since our involvement. All right. Well, we do have good practice in Afghanistan. We did a 20-year war there. So I guess we'll be right up there with the great empires of the Middle Ages. Is that where we are? I don't know what I'm doing today. It's Wednesday. We're expecting snow outside. I got a few chores to do. Let me tell you some good news on the personal front, because I had filled you in about my mom's, I call it ours, because, you know, she's in the house too and I'm in the house, well, you know. But my mom's little Yorkshire poodle, Ginger, actually had some good news. We were a bit concerned about kidney and liver chemistry levels, and so she had tests yesterday. Yes, yesterday. What day is it? Or was it Monday? Yes. No, she went in on Monday. There we go. Went in on Monday. And we took her in for a follow-up for some other issues and heart, because she does have congestive heart issues, and so she's on medicine for that. Wanted to see if the medicine was working, and it is. But we had to get some chemistry tests for her liver and kidneys, and that would determine whether she's healthy enough to get the surgery on her displaced patella. And I explained what was going on there, that that breed of dog doesn't develop a deep enough groove where the tendon and the patella affix, and it gets slipped out. And so she was a three-legged dog over the weekend, and I felt sorry for her because, you know, she's in pain. But the liver was somewhat of an issue, and apparently the reason being is that the infections that she had before, and that was what the follow-up was, had some pretty bad ear infections and skin issues and a few other things. So that probably pushed up the uric and other more caustic parts of the chemistry coming out of her kidney and liver. Well, I did say that there was some good news, and it looks like she's getting over those infections, and she doesn't have the dangerous levels of the chemicals that she had before. And so we will call up the vet today to schedule her surgery, which the Dr. Dickey said it's not a normal one, so it'll probably be fast-tracked. And so that would happen fairly soon. So that's good news. Still have a little bit of an issue. We're going to have her get a barium test because there is something going on in her intestinal tract. And the chemistry that is coming indicates something like that. So maybe a tumor. He doesn't think it is. Doesn't have anything to do with kidney or liver disease, so that's good. But there's something in the intestinal tract that is abrading and causing some bleeding in there, and we need to figure out what that is. But it is not an issue in terms of getting her patella surgically repaired. So I'm not describing the patella surgery very well, but that's the gist of it. The patella is displaced. I know what that feels like. Oh, I've had mine manipulated back in place, and that was no fun because I had calcium deposits that had, like little stalactites that had developed underneath my kneecap. So pulling it back over, that hurt. Oh my God, that hurt. And so, yeah, I don't get down on my knees anymore. I should never have to begin with. I like to do hardscape and lay out wood floors and slate and all that. I used to love doing that. But it's physical work that you have to get down on your knees, and I had to stop doing that because my legs wouldn't take it. Yep. Anyway, enough of that personal stuff. What's happening out in the world? Will Donald Trump go to jail? We can only hope. Only hope. You know, any other country in the world elects their poets to be president. Here in America, we elect the gangster, and then the gangster says, I can do anything I want. I'm president. Eek. And I guess he thinks it's a get-out-of-jail card. And apparently that's the way it's been his whole freaking life. Anybody else who pulled off the BS that this guy's been pulling, especially with a mob. Now, I got to say, you dig around with the mob, Sicilian, New York, Philadelphia, Colorado, Kansas City, and the Russian mob. You usually are not long for this world. So this guy's been getting a get-out-of-jail card, and the hitman doesn't get to hit card too. His whole life. Makes you wonder, what the F? Is that guy that lucky? Or is he that much of a hard worker that he's able to, I don't know, dig up the dirt? Yeah, so anyway, for some reason, we elected that guy. And when I say we, I don't mean the reasonable people in America, but the deplorables were able to manipulate it. Notice how we just accepted the 2016 election. Oh, yeah, we were pissed off because we knew exactly what happened. But what can you do? He got elected. Got to just live with it, you know. But you don't have to put up with his crimes. And that's what they're arguing about now, is that, oh, well, they just hated him from the beginning. Well, yeah, most cops do hate mobsters. So I had no problem when they said, oh, well, you know, the DOJ and the FBI, they already were disposed to dislike Donald Trump. Yeah, because he's a crook. God, I don't know too many cops who are enamored with crooks. There are some because they're corrupt and they're crooks. But by and large, law enforcement sort of recoils against the banditry that Trump does. And so I had no problem with that. And then he, from the get-go, the Muslim ban. Well, that's absolutely unconstitutional. What, we're supposed to just go ahead and accept that? We had to accept the election. But even with all the crimes committed, all the gaslighting, all of the corruption, Antifa did not storm the Capitol. And now Fox was trying to tell people on the day after the insurrection, or the day of, it's Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Look at them. And it's all these maggots. 10,000 of them more. They keep lowballing that number, too. Oh, it was only a few hundred inside. No, it wasn't. It was several thousand at least. And then outside, it was probably 20 to 30,000. Bust in. Organized. You know, like a conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States of America. But yeah, let's talk about Kamala Harris's paella pan. Mm-hmm. And how she just is going to drag the ticket down. You know, everywhere she goes, she's a rock star. I know I'm jumping around, but that's the way it is. She's a rock star everywhere she goes. And Politico and all the press, the corporate media saying, oh, she's such a drag. Yeah, they're going to start calling her a cop again, like that's a bad, well, pejorative. I kind of like to have a cop in Kamala's position, to be honest with you. Because, well, you know what? Let's just go ahead and talk about Merrick. Because I think he's getting a bad rep. Yep. Just because he's not out there giving a 4-page synopsis to go against the Mueller report, for instance. Oh yeah, this is what it says before we got to look at it. And then what Barr said had nothing to do with what the Mueller report is, but everybody says, oh yeah, there was no collusion. None. There was no conspiracy. None. Then you read the Mueller report and you go, my God, these guys are traitors. My God. So, with all of the double standards, I had to bring one more up at the top there because I'm a little peeved about these villages people in Florida. Seems every time we hear about some voter fraud, real voter fraud, people voting more than once, who is it? I know that there's probably some Democrats out there somewhere. And when we find out that there were somewhere out there some Democrats who, quote, voted fraudulently, it's like, well, they didn't actually really vote. But here we have time and again in this last election, and this proves the system works, okay? People who attempted to vote twice got caught. And they'll get slaps on the wrist. Why? Because they're white and they're Republican. I haven't seen a Republican yet that's gone to jail for years for voting twice or more, voting under the name of their dead mother. All the things they accuse us of doing on a massive scale, they've been doing on a minuscule scale to prove it can be done, I guess. So Crystal Mason, out on work release, doesn't realize that she's not actually left the jail system, tried to file a provisional ballot, not even voting, just filed the provisional ballot. Those are set aside. And when they said, oh, well, we're sorry, but the filing here is rejected because you still have to serve out the term and you got another couple of weeks left. Threw her ass in jail for 5 years because she's a black woman. A welfare queen in jail. A boogeyman. Look, voter fraud. And then you got these 3 people just arrested here for voting twice each from the villages. All maggots. I know that they don't really can't really say who they voted for, but when they go to their social media pages, 2 of them are avowed maggots. One calls himself an independent, but he's got everything maggot on his page. So, just saying. So that kind of bugs me. Crystal Mason in jail for 5 years, and these people will go, oh, well, you'll have to do some community service. Don't vote twice, and that's your community service. That's all they'll get. Welcome to America. On the rest of the menu, starting off here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a new report found the American Rescue Plan created millions of jobs. So why are we not shouting that to high heaven? Because the media won't let us. 3 western states will sign an agreement to voluntarily cut back Colorado River water use. And the Treasury Department has awarded $8.7 billion for lending in minority communities. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the European Union plan for a sweeping update of big tech rules gains momentum. And Mexico and the United States began work on a new security framework. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page there, at the bottom, or near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it will help us pay our bills, as well as continue the upgrade of physical machinery and the software that is always, well, needing upgrades as we continue this now going on 11 years of powerhouse resistance against the violent takeover of the United States of America. If you could afford an espresso type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, yes, we are able to pool that money with what we pull out of our own wallets and pay our bills, continue the upgrades, and this resistance against the now violent takeover of the United States of America. They're not kidding around anymore. Anyway, all kidding aside, your generosity has sustained us, and we are forever thankful. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. And thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Indeed, I do. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. I don't know what's going up. I heard Greg mention that Apple Podcasts, I guess because they're podcasts, apparently isn't carrying the live stream. You know, Netroots Radio through the day. You can always find us at netrootsradio.com. There's a great player right at the top there. But now I'm a little worried about what's going on. Could something be going on with our podcast? Is there some sort of certificate we're supposed to get again? We'll have to have Tom and Kelly and the crew look into that. Wonder what is up. Anyway, let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yes, it's out of the American Independent, and Nick Vachon penned this piece. A new report from the Roosevelt Institute found that the American Rescue Plan, you know, the $1.9 trillion spending bill passed by the Democrats and signed into law by President Joe Biden, blunted some of the worst economic effects of COVID-19. Oh, no! Something good happened. We can't report on it. There are many achievements to celebrate, from millions more jobs and higher wages to greater economic security and increased worker power. The report's authors, Mike Consol and Emily DeVito, wrote, and even better, we avoided the worst-case alternative, the weaker, slower recovery that was projected if the American Rescue Plan had not passed, and deeper harm to those who've historically been left behind by past recoveries. The stimulus package pushed growth beyond government predictions across several categories, including employment, wages, and GDP. Before the stimulus package was passed, the CBO and the Federal Reserve's Federal Open Market Committee predicted a slow, grinding recovery, similar to the one that followed the 2008 economic recession. But after the American Rescue Plan went into effect, unemployment rates fell rapidly with the addition of more than 1.3 million jobs. At present, the U.S. economy is rebounding roughly 8 times faster than it did after 2008. The American Rescue Plan has been especially crucial for younger and lower income workers. Using data from the Atlanta Federal Reserve, the Roosevelt Institute found that workers aged 16 to 24 saw a 9.7% wage increase, while the bottom quarter of wage earners saw a 5.1% increase, even when accounting for inflation. The American Rescue Plan has also benefited American workers more broadly. According to Aaron Dajit Dube, a professor of economics at UMass Amherst, the bottom 70% of workers have seen real wage growth over the past 2 years. Given that U.S. wages have remained stagnant for decades, this represents a significant shift in favor of American workers. From 1964 to 2018, the average American hourly wage increased by just $2, adjusted for inflation, a paltry 10% raise over the course of 54 years. Peterson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. To help stave off another round of mandatory cutbacks, water leaders for Arizona, Nevada, and California are preparing to sign an agreement that would voluntarily reduce Colorado River water to the lower basin states by 500,000 acre-feet, enough to supply about 750 households for a year for both 2022 and 2023. The agreement, known as the 500-plus plan, would require millions of dollars from each state over 2 years, $60 million from Arizona, $20 million from Nevada, and $20 million from California, with federal matching dollars to fund payments for water use reduction and efficiency projects that result in supply savings throughout the lower basin. The signing is expected to take place today at the Colorado River Water Users Association annual meeting in Las Vegas. Oh, I hope that doesn't just stay in Las Vegas. Amid urgency to negotiate new rules for managing the depleted river beyond 2026, when the 2007 interim guidelines expire, Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, hit record lows this year, spurring reduced 2022 deliveries for junior water rights holders in Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. Lower levels would automatically lead to even more cutbacks at certain thresholds. There is currently no plan for how the supply would be managed should Lake Mead drop below 1,025 feet above sea level. Modeling suggests that could likely happen as soon as 2024 if the 500-plus plan is not adopted. Next year marks 100 years since the Colorado River Compact was signed, apportioning the river's water among 7 states and later Mexico during an unseasonably wet era. In the years since then, federally subsidized water projects allowed cities and farms to balloon, and 40 million people now rely, at least in part, on the Colorado River's water. As scientists say, climate change is making the West warmer and more arid. Far less water is available in the system to meet demands of all its users. Associated Press staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. Treasury Department announced yesterday, Tuesday, the release of $8.7 billion to help increase lending to small and minority-owned businesses and people living in poorer communities with limited access to banking. The funds from the Emergency Capital Investment Program, which was created this year, will go to 186 community-based financial institutions. Vice President Kamala Harris and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen discussed the investments and remarks at the Freedmen's Bank Forum, which was hosted by the Treasury Department. Yellen stressed that there would be a direct link between the money being provided and businesses and local communities, saying that she recently met the owner of a tea company in Atlanta called Just Add Honey, who lacked the financial credit to keep all her shops open during the pandemic. Black Americans represent 13.4% of the U.S. population, yet Federal Reserve figures show that they control just 4.3% of household wealth. More than half of black household wealth is in the form of pension entitlements, which cannot be passed along to future generations. This inequity makes it harder for people living in predominantly black communities to qualify for business loans and mortgages in ways that could help build their net worth. The $8.7 billion will go to institutions headquartered in 36 states as well as Guam and Washington, D.C. Roughly 54% of the funds is going to banks and 46% to credit unions. The distributions will range from more than $200 million for the largest institutions to less than $100,000 for the smaller ones. Well, that's good news. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, a care package. If you're the type of person who doesn't get musicals, I probably have to tell you who Jonathan Larson was. Jonathan Larson wrote Rent, wrote the cultural event that swirled around art, millennials, and AIDS that exploded in the 1990s. And because the universe does not care about us, Larson died of a cardiac malfunction before he even saw his show open. Now, before Rent, Larson wrote and performed a monologue with songs with just him, a piano, and a band, dealing with his anxiety about turning 30 before having achieved any professional success. He called it Tick, Tick, Boom. So after Rent, in mourning for the man who seemed to have been poised to become the future of musical theater, people reworked Tick, Tick, Boom into a 3-person, 3-act show. And what we have now is Lin-Manuel Miranda, musical theater's new savior, making his directorial debut with his film adaptation. So, 3 things about Miranda's Tick, Tick, Boom. 1, Miranda hits it out of the park. He understands that even though movies bathe in realism, movie musicals can't because musicals themselves aren't realistic. So from jump, Miranda shows us from the editing style to moments of visual magic that we're watching a filmic construction. And speaking of editing, Tick, Tick, Boom has 2 great editors, Andrew Weissblum, until he had to go back to work with Darren Aronofsky, and Myron Kirstein, who edited In the Heights. And Miranda himself said that his skills as a composer, knowing tension and release, feeling when to slow down and when to move along, helped prepare him to work with those 2. 3, Andrew Garfield holds the center of this film with a stunningly expressive performance. I mean, he sells the songs, sells them as top-shelf goods. You're drawn to his John Larson. You root for his John Larson. You love his John Larson. Tick, Tick, Boom benefits from the collection of the right people. Miranda cares about Broadway, cares about musical theater, cares about Jonathan Larson, and thus helps us care about his story. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Vitak. The question of how life came to be has captivated humans for millennia. The prevailing theory now is that on a highly volatile early Earth, lightning struck mineral-rich waters, and that the energy from lightning strikes turned those minerals into the building blocks of life, organic compounds like amino acids, leaving behind something we often refer to as the primordial soup. The wide acceptance of this theory is in large part due to the very famous Miller-Urey experiment. You surely encountered this in a science textbook at some point, but to refresh your memory, in 1952, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey simulated the conditions of early Earth by sealing water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen in a glass flask. Then, they applied electrical sparks to the mixture. Miraculously, amino acids came into existence amid the roiling mixture. It was a big deal. But recently, a team of researchers realized that, much like the first primordial soup, sitting in a bowl of Earth, the lab experiments container played an underappreciated role. That perhaps it was also critical to the creation of organic building blocks inside their laboratory life soup. I talked to someone from the team.
I am Raffaele Saladino from University of Tuscia in Italy.
Then, much like today, when a researcher goes to start an experiment, often one of the first things they do is reach for their glassware. Well, today, actually, we use a lot of plastic as well.
But 20 years ago, in the lab, only glass contained it, because in the mind of the researcher, glass is inert.
He said inert, meaning that it doesn't react with the chemicals you put inside it. But in reality, that is not necessarily always the case. Most of the time, glass is pretty inert. When you're baking with Pyrex, which is made of borosilicate glass, the same type of glass most labware is made out of, the cookware isn't going into your brownies. But when you're baking, whatever's in the pan is usually mostly water, so it'll come out to a pH of around 7 or so. But the pH of the Miller-Urey experiment was much higher. In the original experiments, they used a pH of 8.7, which is more alkaline or basic.
Why alkaline environment is an important topic? Since under alkaline condition, borosilicate then is not inert. It became a reagent.
In fact, this was actually noted by Miller in his original experiments, that the alkaline conditions caused the silica to dissolve. But it was largely overshadowed by the discovery of the synthesis of organic compounds. And as future researchers carried on, they missed that point in Miller's notes.
The attention was concentrated on modify the atmosphere, on modify the energy, the intensity, modify the analytical tools.
And the role of silica got forgotten entirely. Dr. Saladino's team wanted to see if the glass was doing anything in the reaction. To test this, they set up 3 different versions of the original experiment, where everything was the same except the containers. For comparison, they chose Teflon, which does not dissolve when holding an alkaline solution the way glass does.
There is the experiment only glass, the experiment only Teflon, and in the medium there is the experiment in Teflon with some pieces of glass added inside.
Then they used a technique called mass spectrometry to analyze what each reaction produced. Mass spectrometry is great for figuring out what kinds of molecules are in a complex mixture. They found that Teflon produced very few organic compounds. There were more compounds in the Teflon with glass pieces, but the glass container, by far, created the greatest number and largest variety of organic molecules. The mechanism of exactly how the silica helps catalyze the reaction is not clear yet, but it very clearly does. The obvious question then is, was there silica available in the early Earth environment?
The water is not suspended in the vacuum, no? The water is in geochemistry, is surrounded by minerals. Silica and borosilicate are the most abundant minerals surrounding the water.
The team has 2 next major objectives in mind. First, to try updating the experiment to model more closely the amount of silica that would have been available in the early Earth. And second, they want to try replacing silica with extraterrestrial minerals, like pieces of meteorite or rocks from other planets. Apart from just being very cool, that would give a more concrete idea of how to look for life in space. But here on Earth, coming one step closer to fully understanding why we exist is that much more satisfying. Even after nearly 70 years, a key discovery in our complex origin story still carries new revelations. As the authors say in the paper, the role of the rocks was hidden in the walls of the reactors. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Vitak.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
In a world that's clogged and choking with a massive overdose of plastic trash, you'll be heartened to learn that governments and industries are teaming up to respond forcefully to this planetary crisis. Unfortunately, their response has been to engage in a global race to make more plastic stuff and to force poor countries to become dumping grounds for plastic garbage. Leading this Kafkaesque greed fest are such infamous plunderers and polluters as ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and other petrochemical profiteers. With fossil fuel profits crashing, the giants are rushing to convert more of their oversupply of oil into plastic. But where to send the monstrous volumes of waste that will result? The industry's chief lobbyist outfit, the American Chemistry Council, looked around last year and suddenly shouted, "Eureka! There's Africa!" In particular, they're targeting Kenya to become a plastics hub for global trade in waste. However, Kenyans have an influential community of environmental activists who've enacted some of the world's toughest bans on plastic pollution. To bypass this inconvenient local opposition, the dumpers are resorting to an old corporate power play: free trade. Their lobbyists are pushing an autocratic trade agreement that would ban Kenyan officials from passing their own laws or rules that interfere with trade in plastic waste. Trying to hide their ugliness, the plastic profiteers created a PR front group called Alliance to End Public Waste. But hello, it's not public waste. Exxon and other funders of the alliance make, promote, and profit from the mountains of destructive trash they now demand we clean up. This is Jim Hightower saying the real problem is not waste, but plastic itself. Rather than subsidizing more of the stuff, we should seek out and encourage people who are developing real solutions and alternatives.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Can a high school punish a student for criticizing the school on Snapchat? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. At a high school in Pennsylvania, a 9th grader, identified in the recent Supreme Court decision as BL, didn't make the varsity cheerleading squad, and in the words of the court, did not accept that decision with good grace. More specifically, BL posted to her Snapchat friends group an image of herself and a friend giving a middle finger salute with the caption, "F*** school, f*** softball, f*** cheer, f*** everything." The image was brought to the attention of the school authorities, who punished her, suspending her from the JV cheerleading squad for a year. The student apologized, but to no avail. The punishment stood until the student sued in federal district court and won at the Court of Appeals, and at the end of June won her freedom of speech case at the Supreme Court as well. The High Court ruled that the school's interest in teaching good manners did not overcome the student's interest in free expression, emphasizing that the speech caused minimal disruption to teaching, learning, and school activities, and that the school has an important interest in protecting a student's unpopular expression, especially when the expression takes place off campus. The 8-1 majority opinion, written by Justice Breyer, intentionally does not answer all the questions of when off-campus speech might not be protected, but made clear that in this instance, it clearly was. A good and clear victory for freedom of speech. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day Kansas National Guard troops marched into Crawford County coalfields to quell the Mother's March. 8,000 miners went on strike that September to protest the jailing of their United Mine Worker District leader, Alexander Howitt. Howitt was found guilty of violating a statewide strike injunction for calling workers out on strike in 1919. Governor Henry Justin Allen had established a state industrial court which ruled strikes illegal. Howitt's members considered it a new kind of fugitive slave act. They likened their jailed leader to a modern-day John Brown. The United Mine Workers opposed the court and the increasing number of unauthorized strikes. Many district leaders were divided over this protest strike and chose not to support it. The strike also divided the membership, and some went back to work. Conditions worsened after 3 months until the striking miners' wives took matters into their own hands. They met in Franklin to organize a march that would effectively shut down the mines. Their numbers grew from 500 that first day to over 4,000. According to Benjamin Guzin, for 3 days the women stormed area mines, obstructed traffic, and assaulted workers. When met with resistance, they threw red pepper at scab workers and overturned their lunch buckets, showering the miners with coffee and what had been intended as their midday meals. 4 companies of National Guard troops, including a machine gun division, arrived to stop the march and break the strike. The press derisively referred to the women as the Amazon Army. Many women were arrested, but mobilized their newly won voting power to unseat anti-labor politicians the next spring. As a result, the state's industrial court was ruled unconstitutional. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 30 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 36. Snow this morning will mix with rain at times. It's been raining a bit, and I haven't quite seen the snow fall, but it should quite soon. It's not actually dropping anything right now. And we're expecting, snow accumulating about a half a foot. We'll see how that goes. And tonight we'll have lows in mid-30s with rain with some snow mixing overnight. Winds light and variable today and tonight. Tomorrow, showers in the morning with some clearing in the afternoon. Highs in the low 40s. Winds light and variable. We still have not gotten an update on the coronavirus infection numbers. I wonder if the state is not doing them daily as they used to. We'll look into that. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 29 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 55 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 48 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and fair. Kyiv is 30 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 30 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 67 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 45 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 70 and mostly clear. San Francisco, California is 44 degrees, mostly cloudy with a flood advisory. And New York, New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is Weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Kelvin Chan of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The European Union's ambitious plan to update its pioneering internet rules gained momentum after a key committee yesterday, Tuesday, passed measures requiring technology companies to better police content, and lawmakers prepared to vote on regulations to rein in big tech. The 27-nation bloc has, for the past year, been drafting a sweeping overhaul of regulations for digital companies aimed at making sure tech giants like Google and Facebook, now renamed Meta, treat rivals fairly and protect users on their platforms. The rules, which have been the subject of fierce lobbying from the tech industry, look set for approval from lawmakers, though they still face tough negotiations next year with EU bodies. The regulations, and similar ones in the United Kingdom, to curb harmful online content, show Europe's role as a pace setter for regulating the tech industry as a global movement picks up pace following whistleblower Frances Haugen's allegations that Facebook put profits ahead of safety.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mexico and the United States began work yesterday, Tuesday, on the new framework that will govern their security relationship going forward and replaces the Merida initiative, which had focused on building up Mexico's capabilities to battle the drug cartels. The U.S.-Mexico Bicentennial Framework for Security, Public Health, and Safe Communities seeks to move beyond the Merida initiative. Working groups composed of representatives of the armed forces, Homeland Security, and justice agencies of both countries gathered in Mexico in what Foreign Affairs Secretary Marcelo Ebrard termed the birth certificate of the new agreement. The two countries will continue cooperating against organized crime networks in both countries, including those that smuggle migrants. U.S. Ambassador Ken Salazar said both presidents had urged them to act quickly. They are actions, immediate actions, Salazar said. Ebrard and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had announced the general outlines of the new framework in October. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know, of course, Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.